Hello, amazing women. Can you see me? Okay, I'm about to start. Before I start, I'm just going to check that you can actually hear me. We've had a few technical issues of late. So, if you can hear me, please let me know. If you can type in the little chat box, that would be fantastic. So, tonight we're going to be focusing on negotiation. So, I hope you got the fabulous article that I sent you and also the YouTube video. So if you can hear me, just say hello. I know it's a little bit delayed, but what I'm going to do is start sharing my screen. And I hope you've had an amazing week this week. Okay. Okay, someone's actually getting... Okay. I'm going to start it and see if I can... Okay, before I start, I'm just going to check everyone's okay to start. Okay. Okay, negotiation skills. So I want you to think about, I gave you a handout today in an article around what was your definition of negotiation. And I think people see, and it's funnily enough today, I actually spent the day negotiating because I was told that I had to move house a month ago because my owners wanted to move in. And then I finally found somewhere to move yesterday, and then the owners decided to tell me through their real estate agent that they have decided they don't want to move in to where I'm living and I can stay. So today I've spent the day negotiating, so this was quite timely in terms of doing this webinar on negotiation because I had to spend the day negotiating. You know, a deal in terms of the rent that I'm currently paying and using the rent of the other place, and also, you know, kind of trying to get to a win-win situation around why I would want to stay where I am, considering, you know, the circumstances and also what I've gone through in the last few weeks trying to find somewhere else to live, plus the packing. So today was a negotiation day for me. And I think people tend to think negotiation is, sometimes we see it as conflict, but it's actually a situation where there is conflict, or, you know, a conflict of interest, or what one wants isn't necessarily what the other one wants, or where both sides prefer, you know, to search for solutions. So negotiation is really about a dialogue between two or more people, and parties intended to reach an understanding, resolve points of difference to gain an advantage for an individual, collective, or to craft outcomes to satisfy various interests. So it's, you know, it's really important in, I think, okay, I can see the screen. All right, me too. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to check. That we're starting. I'm seeing a few error messages. Before I continue on, because I want to make sure that the girls can hear this. So okay, I'm just going to keep going. So I'm hoping that the fabulous girls that are actually online can hear this. So in terms of, when we talked about the male and female brain, women are naturally are predisposed to be really good negotiators. And in terms of any sort of negotiation, is it about empathy, but also around understanding and, in terms of, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. But we also need to consider that, women, in terms of from a neuroscience, and I know this is me being very general here, do try to avoid conflict. But negotiation doesn't have to be conflict. It can be about actually coming to a solution where it's a win-win situation, and using our strengths around empathy and also building relationships and collaboration in terms of any sort of negotiation. So if you think about negotiation in terms of people coming together to find a solution that allows, everyone concerned to win, then it actually feels a lot better. And that's how I see negotiation. It's about reaching and understanding, to resolve points of difference, to gain advantage for an individual or collective, or also to craft ideas to satisfy various interests. Okay. So what makes a successful negotiation? And it's something I think for you to think about before, you go into a negotiation, around what is it going to take to make what you're about to do successful? What is it going to take to make it a win-win situation? And I believe there is a few things you need to consider before you go into any negotiation. And this is any sort of negotiation in terms of whether it's a salary negotiation or, in terms of negotiating, for instance, a rental agreement, or going into a negotiation when you're actually negotiating household appliances, or, negotiation happens, I think, now every day. People are always out to negotiate so that there is a win-win situation. So in terms of looking at tactics for negotiation, there's some things to consider around being prepared. Looking for that, and preparation is really important, and there's some great things in terms of your handout before you actually go into a negotiation to actually think about when you prepare. Things like, outlining your objectives, what is your wish list for the negotiation, and visualize what you want to get out of the negotiation as well. What do you actually need? How are you going to go about it, justifying it, and why also should they give you what they want? Also look for common ground. Encourage mutual listening as well. Think about the negotiation. I think sometimes when we're in negotiation, especially if it is with men, as we know, are quite results or outcomes driven, and don't take anything personally. It's about putting yourself in the fact that you're in a role, you're confident, you're professional, and it's about just having that dialogue. And there might be times where you're going to have courageous conversations. Don't make it personal. Don't accuse. Keep your cool as well. Consider the fact that it is just two people or a group of people actually having a discussion to come to a point where you can reach some sort of solution or next steps. Look at monitoring the proceedings. Use positive body language. So it's funny, in that article that I actually sent you all today, there was a section in the article, they talk about body language, and they talk about Amy Cuddy. And if you didn't get a chance, we did talk about Amy Cuddy, and we showed the TED Talk. And if you want me to email you the TED Talk again about the power pose, they actually mention in that handout, in that article that I sent you, about, before you go into any negotiation, do the power pose, get the testosterone happening within your body and decrease the cortisol. I think that would be something of a really powerful tactic before you go into any negotiation. Make sure also, in terms of negotiation, you keep it at a steady pace. Be flexible and conclude decisively as well. If you haven't been able to come to any sort of decision at the end of a negotiation, still talk about next steps or decide on where you're going to go from there as well. I think that's really important. So yeah, it's important that in terms of your plan that you outline your objectives, your wish list, what do you actually need, how you're going to justify, and why should they give you what you want. And those are some things that you need to start to think about or even write down before you go into any sort of a negotiation, because you want to be prepared. And I think in terms of if you're in a negotiation with another party or parties, that'll show a real strength and confidence in terms of going into a negotiation at meetings. So this is actually a bit of a step-by-step way in terms of how you can go about a negotiation. I know the slide's a little bit small, a little bit hard to read, but you can get it in your handout. It's something just to help you keep on track. I still think it's important, and it's a strength of ours in setting the scene. Like taking the time to set the scene at the beginning of a negotiation can help us actually speed up the process, because it ensures that everyone involved is clear and what is to come. And it is about also building relationships as well. You know, it's also useful to include, you know, some of the following in the beginning of a negotiation, and these things include, and I'm going to kind of talk about them now, you know, personal introductions, purpose of the meeting, time frame of the meeting, relevant background information, meeting agenda, decision-making process, authority levels, talk about constraints, boundaries, you know, invite the other party if they want to raise any sort of points or concern before we actually, you know, start in the negotiation as well. I think that's really important. So by setting the scene, I think it's important to set those boundaries and set the agenda, so everyone knows what to expect when you're actually going to be going through any sort of negotiation process or meeting. The next one is about opening up the negotiation. This step really requires all parties to put their interest on the negotiating table. And funnily enough, even things like when I'm actually working with teams or projects where we've got, I mean, I work with a lot of construction projects, and you've got the client and you've got the contractor. And I do a lot of team alignment meetings, and there's a lot of negotiation in these meetings, because you've got people from a team that are working on the client side, and you've got people from a team working on the contracting side, and sometimes they don't see eye to eye in terms of how the project should be delivered. So a lot of my work is done by bringing these two teams together and going, okay, let's understand what we want to achieve in terms of negotiating, you know, what outcomes or what the purpose is of the project and how we're going to get there. And it's important that I get from each of those teams what their interests are and what they want to get out of any sort of team building intervention, so that at the end of the intervention or the day that I'm working with them, we're able to walk away with some sort of next steps or agreement. It's also important to kind of decide who states their position as first. So part of this is around listening well. Using open questions, checking your understanding of the other person's position. Summarizing is really important as well, so you can get a sense that you're both on the same page. Even though there might be discussions around opening up the negotiation and people putting their interests on the table, it's still really good to say, okay, this is what I'm hearing. If I kind of summarize what we've been talking about, these are some of the key things that I feel that we need to focus on. Then again, it's setting the scene for the rest of the negotiations meeting or process. So people within the parties within the negotiation are like, yeah, okay, we're on the same page, let's move on. It's important not to interrupt, put down the other party's position. You're going to have to play your cards right. Don't really reveal too much of your negotiating stance. So they're just some little tips. The next step requires both parties to spend some time more fully exploring the other person's position. This begins to identify common ground and potential sticking points. and it's important to kind of understand where people, you know, what they want and what they're seeing through their lens as well. So when I do this in, say, sort of team interventions or team building exercises where I've got two different teams from two different organisations negotiating, you know, a way forward, I kind of brainstorm this as a facilitator. I mean, if you're actually within an organisation where you're part of a negotiation meeting or process, you know, it's still worthwhile to do it, but I tend to go, okay, let's kind of talk about, you know, getting an understanding of where we're both at, what are some things that we really want to focus on, what do we want, you know, setting those objectives, you know, what is the common ground here, what are some of the things we really want to focus on that could be those potential sticking points, so you can really be, you know, they're prevalent at the start, so you know what you need to focus on when exploring different positions. Then it's about finding common ground. I mean, this step summarises where both parties agree. This can give the negotiation a positive lift, even if there's some, you know, even if there's more differences than common ground. You know, and this works a real treat where, from a neuroscience perspective, you're trying to get people in that reward state where they're not thinking of this as a threat, that we're actually going through this meeting or this intervention where it's going to be a day of conflict and win-lose or lose-lose, where you're actually going, hey, this is going to be a really positive experience for all of us. Let's kind of talk about, you know, where is the common ground? You know, what do we want to focus on? What are some of the things that are working really well? So there, and things to focus on. And I mean, I use a flip chart for these sort of things, and I'm very much about keeping a positive attitude and making positive statements. And if I feel that the meeting or intervention is, you know, it keeps kind of digressing to error or the negatives, I keep pulling it back to, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing that this is, you know, might be an issue, or this could be something that we need to work on, but let's just keep on focusing on moving forward. Let's keep focusing on where we're going. It's important as well in this sort of step that you don't allow yourself to become negative. You know, if there seems to be a lot of sticking points, I mean, don't get swamped or tempted by also putting sticking points under the table and just dismissing them, because if they are sticking points, they're still important. And also, don't blame the other party if they won't move on sticking points as well. So the sticking points, you know, the sticking points, it's important that you actually do address them. I mean, it involves summarising where the sticking points seem to be. These can then be explored in more detail, and attempts can be made to resolve them. You know, things like make a note of the sticking points, keep a positive attitude and make positive statements, deal with any conflict also in a really constructive way, and conflict will happen. Not in every negotiation, but, you know, if conflict does happen, it's just part of the process, and actually conflict can actually be really powerful and worthwhile. And, you know, again, don't interrupt, don't put down the other party's position, or reveal your total negotiating stance. Excuse me. It's interesting with this, when I actually work with teams that are negotiating a way forward, when I'm trying to understand what the sticking points are with teams, I use a really great, and if you want some more information on it, I use a really great process called the infinity process, and I actually get teams to get post-it notes and write their sticking points on post-it notes. So I'll say to a team, look, okay, we want to be a high-performance team. We want to work more collaboratively together, and we need to have conflict. We need to kind of understand what are some of the things we need to work through. I mean, there's some great things that are happening with the team, like focusing on the positive, but we do have a few sticking points with the team. I want you to write down any of your sticking points on a post-it note. So per post-it note, write one sticking point per post-it note. And you find that it's not as confronting when people are writing it on post-it notes. Then I say to the teams in my interventions, okay, put your post-it notes on the wall Just put them on the wall, sit back on the table, and then what I do with the sticking points is I put them into themes. And I go, okay, I can see some sticking points here. And this is just, again, part of negotiation. You know, we need to negotiate a way forward here. So therefore, part of that is understanding, for us to achieve an outcome through this process, how are we going to overcome these sticking points? And I put the sticking points into themes, and it might be I'm seeing some themes around communication, and I'm seeing some themes around systems and processes, and I'm seeing some themes around conflict in the group. So I put them into themes, and I go, okay, now let's start building a movement around this. Let's start moving forward, and by resolving these areas, let's work as a team. So it's around, again, that negotiation process, and I'm using a really powerful change management process where I'm getting their buy-in to be part of building that movement, where they're going to be working together with me to come up with some solutions. So it's about, you know, moving forward by offering concessions and working to resolve the sticking points. And it's important to remain positive through this stage of the process as well. And things to focus here are, you know, aiming for a win-win outcome, you know, summarising, being open about your motives and intentions, giving reasons before making a decision, anticipating counter arguments, asking questions. You know, it's about building that common ground. Some dotes around this are things like don't make threats or use sarcasm. You know, make irritating phrases like, you know, I'm sure you'll accept my generous offer. You know, become defensive or attack the other party, insult the other party, you know, question the other party's motives, don't reject arguments out of hand, you know, or force decision prematurely as well. So some real definite do's and don'ts when you're going through this process, and the only way you're actually going to be more confident when it actually comes to negotiation is by actually doing it, and doing it regularly. If you have a chance to actually put your hand out to negotiate or be involved in any negotiation meetings, go for it. The next one is around reaching agreement. So making sure that you're ready to reach agreement and check that both parties have the same understanding of what is proposed. So give people time to consider acceptance, and it may be necessary to adjourn the meeting or build in face savers as well. And if I kind of use my example of when I've got, you know, teams working together, negotiate a way of working better together and delivering on outcomes in terms of projects they're working on. You know, when I'm in this building momentum and I'm actually getting the teams to come up with solutions to those sticking points, and when they're actually working together to come up with solutions, and, you know, empowering them and building that movement to looking towards and looking at. Then I bring the team together, the parties together, and I say, okay, let's reach agreement as a complete unit or team or party as a way forward. And look, sometimes you'll get people that say, hey, look, no, I still think we need to do some work here or have more discussions, and hey, that's fine, but at least it's a way forward. You know, things around reaching agreement, some do's around recording decisions in writing and making sure they're witnessed. Give people time to consider their acceptance, check that all parties are committed to the decision and will abide by it. Make sure all parties are also clear about the next steps. Don't rush decisions before everyone has agreed. You know, make sure don't leave any follow-up actions open-ended as well, or also gloat is important. And last but not least, the last thing is following up. So after this step, it's really important. I'm a real stickler for this, is many people forget that following up is really important in terms of reaching agreement. So, you know, send an email to all parties summarising the agreement reached and the next steps. Implement your agreed actions. You know, send a letter of thanks to everyone that's negotiation. Just don't forget to follow up. It's just really important that any sort of negotiation interventional process, there's some sort of follow-up or next steps. Okay, there's some really great tips for women that I thought I would really focus on that were some of the key themes that came out of that article I sent you. Okay, you know, in negotiation, you know, it's been proven time and time again through all the research that, you know, women don't negotiate. I'm not going to say as well, but women tend to, you know, Sheryl Sandberg, you know, mentioned it in her book that she was willing to take, you know, the first offer that was offered to her when she was offered the role at Facebook. And, you know, then she realized, you know, her husband said, hang on a second, you're supposed to be doing this in your role. And, you know, she decided to negotiate. And it's, again, I mean, maybe it's we need more practice, or women tend to, you know, from a neuroscience perspective, be more concerned in terms of looking after others rather than themselves and putting others first. But there's some really great tips that I felt that came out of that article around making sure you focus on skills. So women may be able to gain confidence and overcome this insidious stereotypes by viewing negotiation skill that that can be improved through practice, which it is, rather than so as a stable personality trait. So focus on the skills and the experience that you bring when it comes to any sort of negotiation, regardless of what gender you are. Also emphasize communal skills. So when advocating for yourself, women can avoid a backlash by stressing that they will negotiate just as assertively for the organizer. So remember I was just using that example about Sheryl Sandberg, that she needs to negotiate because it's part of her role. So it is, again, by actually going into any sort of negotiation meeting is, hey, this is actually, by me being really effective as a negotiator for you, for myself, is only going to, you know, really provide some amazing experience and skills for the organisation as a whole. Okay, open doors. I mean, organisations, and it's something that I think you could possibly ask for, organisations should actively connect women negotiators with high status colleagues to help them assess career opportunities that were previously closed to them. And this is where mentors and sponsors, I think, can be really effective. I mean, I have never been the best negotiator, but it's actually spending time. I'm actually at the moment working with a CEO who has taken me under his wing in the past month, and I ring him periodically about some proposals and clients that I'm meeting. And he's fantastic in the advice he's given me in terms of how I'm negotiating and how I should negotiate and how I'm presenting my proposals and what I should be focusing on. And I've been blown away by the help he's been giving me in terms of how to be a more effective negotiator, because he has said to me, Sonia, that is his strength. He said to me he loves to negotiate. It's a huge strength of his, and he's trying to impart some of his knowledge onto me. So I'm really blessed. So, you know, if you can, internally or externally, you know, start talking to people that can open doors for you and actually, you know, connect you with women or men that are efficient in this area as well. Also, increase objectivity. To lessen gender bias in their organisations, I believe managers should institute salary benchmarks based on objective performance. We're still seeing, I think it was only a couple of weeks ago I saw on there's a great website called Women's Agenda, that I think we're still earning 17% less than men. I mean, it's great to see that it's been discussed and that it's out there, but it's up to us, but also the organisations and managers that we work with, to really focus on making it more equality when it comes to these things as well. Okay, Okay, that is the end. I'd really like to know what your insights are. If you can actually email me what your insights are, and also around the handouts, and if there are anything in particular that you have taken away from the article or from tonight's webinar that you feel would make a difference in terms of how you negotiate at work or outside of work. You know, it's part of what we do. I think every day we tend to be negotiating one thing or another, either whether it's work with our kids to clean their rooms, or, you know, as I said today, I was negotiating trying to get decreases in rent. But it's the more you practice it, the more that you do it. And again, it's around that confidence piece, that it's just, it's okay. It's great to negotiate. It's okay to have courageous conversations. I would love to know some of your key learnings, and please email them to me. And if you've got any questions, please let me know, and I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a great evening. Bye.